Hello, my friends, and welcome to today's SitRep. It is the first day of February. February? That's the one. 1st of February 2023. Welcome to the SitRep, the situational report, where we go through news stories that I have found interesting over the past day or two and pick it apart and then think about, how can I best prepare myself for that uncertainty that is the future? That's what this is all about. I hope you're all well and healthy and happy wherever you are in the world. And thank you very much for joining. Appreciate it. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. And today we're going to start off by talking about NATO. NATO in the Pacific, which is odd because NATO, the NA, stands for Northern Atlantic. Other side of the world, not the Pacific. So every time that NATO starts putting their little noses into what's happening down here in the Pacific, I always find it interesting. Spreading their power, obviously. The NATO organization, the very same one, and I'm not saying NATO is good or bad, I'm just saying the same organization that vehemently said that they would not expand their hold, they would not push further east towards Russia, and then systematically did that, which is one of the key factors, I believe, why we are in a war right now as a world. That is not to say that we're in World War III, but, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, you get what I mean, right? All right, so what's happening? Stoltenberg, NATO's big man of the hour, is down. He's in South Korea at the moment, poking them in the chest, essentially. I don't actually have this story. I just read it just before, but I just found it really interesting. He's in South Korea and he's poking South Korea in the chest going, why are you not giving to Ukraine? Why are you not bleeding blue and yellow for Ukraine right now, like we all are and all should be? You're a bad person. If you look at the tone of what he actually said, I have been involved in, like, as probably many people have, in a form of abusive relationship before, and especially manipulative relationships where somebody is twisting your mind. When I look at a lot of the propaganda that comes out of the West, that's exactly what it is to me. I look at it and it triggers me straight away. I'm like, whoa, what is this? This feels bad. And this is exactly like what they're saying here. You're a bad country. You're a bad person. You're bad people because you're not giving to Ukraine. I think the quote was something like, do you want tyranny to win? Because that's what's going to happen if you don't give to Ukraine. Now give your weapons of war to Ukraine. Like, okay, I get why you're going around passing the hat around right now. But also South Korea might have some bigger things that they need to deal with. Maybe even Russia on their own front soon enough, but certainly North Korea they have to worry about. And China, perhaps. Or a mix of those two. So that's what's going on. We've got NATO over there in a very big way, but we've also got this story sent to me from my main source. I posted this one from the Washington Post, the WAPO, the font of liberal news. U.S. military poised to secure new access to key Philippine bases. Now, this shouldn't come as any surprise. The U.S. is really pushing into this part of the world right now. I don't know exactly how U.S. feels about Ukraine, but from what I'm seeing, they're acting as though they're feeling relatively secure there in a way, and they're shifting their focus. They've been shifting their focus for the past couple of months in a heightened way. They've been doing it for years, but in a heightened way for the last couple of months towards China, penning in China. So we've seen increased agreements and troop movement into places like Australia, agreements with Japan, agreements with India, agreements with the Philippines, agreements with South Korea. So you can see that they're actually shifting in here. They're really starting to push it into here. And now they're revamping their forces. They're bolstering their bases here. What does this mean for us as preppers? Again, this is geopolitical space that we're looking at. So it doesn't necessarily mean petrol's going to go up tomorrow or something crazy like that. The price of cabbage might not be affected in the next 2 weeks. What this does mean is this is a bigger thing. If we do see war increase here, we're going to see an increase in all products, in all cost of living, mainly because we'll stop getting things from China, but a number of other reasons as well, being that the US is taking up a lot of resources. So, this is something that's worthwhile keeping your eye on, having a look at, just going, okay, yep, nothing's kicked off yet, but we're seeing increased tensions. And you can almost guarantee at this point, as the US does something like this, China will respond in kind, sort of, like in their own way, in kind. At the very least, they'll say some nasty words, but they may start to push into other countries or bolster their own defenses as well. So at the end of the day, what does this point to? This points to an increase in the likelihood of war in the Pacific, especially in the South China Sea. Good morning to you, Norman Lacey, on the YouTubes, who says, agreed, NATO forced this at the insistence of the USA. So NATO's been kind of progressively building up their influence into Pacific, and that's kind of what I'm leading off with today. But they've been actually doing it through other countries. So Germany, UK in particular, France a little bit, and US foremost have been really pushing into this area. And we've got obviously NATO members down here as well. NATO individuals, not NATO country members, officially setting up shop. So where else has Mr. Stoltenberg been? He's been to Japan. So this was a really big one. Japan actually participated in a NATO summit in 2022. That was pretty mind-blowing for, I guess, nerds like me and, people that I talk to, especially like my main source, where we look at this sort of stuff and go, wow, this is big. It may not seem like a big thing at the time, but this is big stuff. NATO, as I said, is Northern Atlantic. Japan, by rights, has nothing to do with it. NATO was formed to check Russian power, or Soviet power, I should say, not Russian power, but it was formed to check Soviet power at the time. Possibly, maybe should have been downgraded or even dissolved at the dissolution of the USSR. But that's neither here nor there. It's still around and it's still growing, like the kind of festering cancer that you might think it is, or the stalwart defenders of freedom and anti-tyranny that you may believe it to be, whichever way you look at it. But either way, it's to do with Northern Atlantic, being that if you look at where the US is situated, then you've got the Atlantic Ocean, then you've got the UK and Europe. That's the span that it's talking about. It's like, hey, yes, US, Canada, UK, Europe, France, all you guys, Germany, you're all part of it. Poland, sure, you can join as well. Let's get you all in. Where are we going? Oh, let's go to the next one. Let's go. Let's start to get Scandinavia in there as well. Turkey, sure, why not? You're not even near the Atlantic, but why not? Let's get you in. So that's essentially Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization. The Japan now is on the exact opposite side of the earth in reality. So the fact that the Japanese Prime Minister has been involved in NATO proceedings for the last year, should raise eyebrows at the very least. Anyway, Stoltenberg has met in Tokyo with the Prime Minister. They are obviously building more of that relationship. So the way it is looking at the moment is, I would not be surprised. We've seen semi-formal alliances around cyber activity that have happened in the past year. It would not really surprise me at this point if we started to see official rumblings about a NATO member from the Pacific. And I think probably first off the chopping block, or, first in the race, I guess, to get into NATO from the Pacific would be Japan. There are a number of other countries that could be, Australia being one, New Zealand certainly being another, but I think Japan is probably first off the rank. I would say Japan, South Korea, I couldn't see doing at this stage, but Again, not beyond the realms of possibility. Philippines definitely also up there. Interesting times anyway. So, we're looking at this sort of stuff. We're seeing the information that's coming out from this, the news reports that are being put out, and it is all pointing towards much more heavily involvement of NATO down in the Pacific. And you take that as what you will. Personally, it doesn't fill me with joy thinking that NATO is going to be operating down here in this sort of space. There's a number of reasons. In case you couldn't tell from my tone before, I'm not the world's biggest fan of NATO. I'm not against NATO. NATO is okay for what it's supposed to do, what it was created to do. But like any other organism on Earth, really, its sole purpose is to survive and then replicate, or survive and then expand. And that's exactly what NATO's been doing. So like I said, in 1991, we could have just put our hands up and said, you know what? NATO did a great job, checked Soviet power. Soviet Union has fallen. It is crumbled now. Maybe we can just say, good work, everyone. Pull down the signs and put this all on mothballs now. Didn't do that. Did kind of the opposite, in fact. NATO continued to expand. So there's a part of me that I go, yes, NATO, I see that, and it's technically our side as well. So, there's that affinity in that sort of side of it. But also I look at it and I see totalitarianism, I see one governance, and that kind of worries me. I see world governance, I see world policing, I see world army, and that not only concerns me, it actually terrifies me. It's the antithesis of what I would like to see in the world, being a libertarian myself, where I'd like to see much less government, much less governance on the individual human being. So yeah. Roscoe, good morning to you. No joy, he says. I agree, compadre. I agree. I've maybe got one more story about this kind of stuff. Unless, here's the Stoltenberg thing from South Korea. Quote, if you don't want autocracy and tyranny to win, then they need weapons. Talking to South Korea about Ukraine. Naughty, naughty South Korea, you're not giving us enough weapons. Give us more weapons now. We need them for your Ukraine. It's like, I'm actually shocked by this. I'm like, this smacks of desperation, really. I read that and was like, why would you go to South Korea and start begging for weapons off them? Is NATO not powerful enough to check Russian power? That's the thing that really got twigged in my mind there. Again, Western propaganda is telling you Russia is close to capitulation. We have almost won. The good guys have almost won. They're running out of soldiers. They're running out of funds. They will be utterly annihilated very, very soon. What are their actions telling us? The exact opposite. Then, in fact, it's not Russia that's like, if I was just looking at the actions here, I would assume that Russia's probably winning. I'm not saying that they are. That's what I would look at and go, that's very problematic for NATO if you're having to go around the world drumming up support. All right. So enough about that. I'll put a pin in the geopolitical situation in the Pacific at the moment. Just a reminder for people about what situations we have on the kind of simmer at the moment that could go boiling at any second. Like I said, South Korea, the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, South Korea, that's an issue. We've also got Russia mixed in there. You can kind of by extension put Japan in there, and then you've got Japan and Russia, who have actually fought a war before, pre-World War One. Yeah, pre-World War One, I'm pretty sure. What was it called? It wasn't the Sino-Rus War. It was some battle that they had. Anyway, if you know your history, you'll know what it's called. Also, if you read up about that, that's actually quite interesting, because Japan was a backwater that no one gave any attention to, and then all of a sudden, Russia started pushing in and wanting some of their islands. They pushed back. They had a naval battle and war, I guess you'd call it, and towed up the Russians. which was at that point in time was one of the largest armies, one of the best armies on Earth, and everyone was like, oh, okay, and that obviously led into eventually World War II, where Japan really put the world on notice with their ability to maneuver themselves and actually win battles. Maybe not hold, but definitely win decisive victories when they had to. Anyway, that's history. So anyway, the flashpoints, as I was saying, Korean Peninsula is one of them. Japan in that area, the Japanese Peninsula, I guess, is another. We've got China, Taiwan, as well. China v everyone, really, in this entire space down here. India, China, and then we can move all the way over to Middle East as well, because that's starting to get pretty hot down there. And I've got a couple of stories on this, so I'll lead into this one now. So obviously we've seen a lot of attacks on Iran recently. If you haven't been paying attention to that, that's kind of a big deal. Well, everyone was sort of like, okay, well, where did these happen from? Well, not everyone. I should be specific about this. There was, from my perspective, a total blackout in mainstream media about this. There was like, hey, Iran just got attacked. There's explosions, and that's it. I'm like, that's not it. Who did these attacks? Yeah, they got attacked. Yep, there was an explosion at one of their things. Anyway, so moving right along. I'm like, oh, not moving right along. Who attacked Iran? The obvious answer is Israel, and it probably is. But Israel, US, I sometimes have a very hard time differentiating between these two at the moment in some of the battle spaces, because they're practically the same. So who did this? Iran is definitely blaming Israel, but is also throwing more than just shade, some full-on accusations at the US right now. This one is actually reported on Newsweek.com. Facing drone strikes, Iran warns any US military action means war. So pretty big words there. In the wake of a drone strike against at least one defensive factory in the central city of Isfahan, Iranian officials told Newsweek that any military option pursued by United States against Islamic Republic would result in all-out conflict with region-wide ramifications. US military has said, no, it wasn't us. We had nothing to do with this. I'm not sure if I snapped the photo of it, but I did see one report saying that it was Mossad. It was the secret squirrel people from Israel conducted these attacks. These were drone attacks. Just to give you a bit more background information here, these were drone attacks. So it's not like these were, smaller drone attacks. These weren't drone attacks allegedly from outside of the country. So there is a potential that these drone attacks initiated within the country, which means somebody had to get into the country with a drone, fly the drone, conduct the attack, and then, I assume, escape. So that requires, as opposed to just launching a drone from the other side of the world and bombing it, what I'm talking about there requires a high level of organization and sophistication within a military unit. Okay, that is some special ops shit right there. I.e., it's not just some farmer who's pissed off at the local government, or it's not just some protest movement that has done this. This is high-level military, and there are only a certain number of militaries in the world that could do this, and then you can shorten that down by going what militaries would want to do this, or who has motive and who has ability. Those are two things that you'd look at with this. US definitely has motive, has ability. I'd say they have maybe less motive, definitely has ability. Israel 100% has ability, 100% has motive to do it. So that's the smoking gun there, I guess, in this issue. But when we're looking at this from the geopolitical standpoint, what does this mean? War in Iran or in and around Iran is a huge deal to us, mainly at the gas pump. When we go to the petrol station, that's where it's going to hurt us. I think it's something like 20 to 30% of the world's fuel comes through the Gulf. So you've got the little strait there that comes up, and you've got Kuwait and you've got Iraq. Then you've got Iran at the top of it that sits across there. So all that fuel, even Saudi Arabia fuel, gets pumped to there and then shipped out through there. And there's a little point right up the top. I think it's Oman, in between Oman and Iran, that essentially Iran can shut it down. They can close off that strait, and that's it. So imagine what's going to happen if 20 to 30% of the world's oil supply stops. Iran has that ability right now. That's, to me, pretty terrifying when you're thinking about it, like what would actually happen, because it's more than just, I did make the assumption there that it would increase fuel price, which I believe it 100% would. There would be a spike in fuel price immediately. It's much bigger than that, though, because it would cut the fuel supply. And unless you are some sort of vegan liberal who lives under a rock and is just consuming the same circle jerk media that you always look at, then you know that the world runs on oil. There's no way around it right now. Okay, we don't have the ability to use something else right now. We run on oil. So if we suddenly cut a third of that oil out of the picture, or even a fifth of that oil out of the picture, this would be a huge blow to everyone, to all movement of all products, all around the world. Like I always say, everything that you're looking at right now, what you're looking at me on, everything that I'm wearing, all of it touched a truck. Every truck is at the moment running, well, that's not true, but is basically running on oil, on diesel, but refined oil products. So yeah, this sort of thing, this Iran war, it's a lot bigger than I think people want to admit or want to pay attention to. Quite often, in my experience at least, Middle East is one of these things where people are like, oh yeah, there's shit going on in the Middle East. That's normal. Shit's always going on in the Middle East. Yeah, yes, that's true. But these things can have huge implications. And if you don't believe me, just look at what happened in the 1970s with the oil crisis that happened there. So that's what's going on in that neck of the woods. And that one, is kind of a bit worrying. Just staying with Russia and Iran at the moment, I just want to go into this story. So we're moving out of battle space type stuff and we're looking at other systems now. And I want to talk about money systems. The SWIFT money system is one of the, it's the bedrock or the foundation of how money moves electronically around the world. That SWIFT system has also been used akin to how the US dollar is being used in the last year or two as a weapon. So it's being utilized against certain countries. We're going to restrict your access to it, or we're going to make it harder for you to get this, or we're not going to let you deal in this. And countries, which was utterly predictable, where this has happened, has just said, okay, well, if we can't use that, we have to use something, so we'll use something else. You get enough countries doing that, and all of a sudden, you have another system. And that's what we have right now. We have the birth of another monetary system, or at least another system of moving money around, unfolding right before us as we're looking at it. So Russians cut off from SWIFT. Iran is one of the most heavily sanctioned countries in the world. So I think it might go Russia, Iran, Venezuela, top three. So why wouldn't, if you were in one of these countries, why wouldn't you just go like, hey, you're kicked out of the club? You're kicked out of the club? Do you want to start our own club? Okay, yeah, cool, let's do that. And then other countries are looking at that and going like, yeah, actually, we'll jump on in this as well. So this one here coming, where is it coming out? I didn't snap where it was coming from. Russia and Iran are combining their banking systems to get around being banned from SWIFT. Several Iranian central bank officials confirmed the partnership with Russia's central bank on Monday. Reuters first reported. However, Russia's central bank has declined to comment on the matter or issue an official statement on its website. So like I said, alternative systems, the US petrodollar hegemony. Me, England, no good today, but it's crumbling. We can see it. Its power has not only just been weakened, it has been stabbed through the guts, and we are now over the threshold of living in a multipolar world. It's no longer just the US who can control the stream of money. What we've seen now is this birth of something else, this unintended consequence that has given birth to another monetary system. And we're seeing more and more countries do this sort of stuff. And I'm talking about a whole heap of countries doing it. We've seen India do it, a form of it. China's definitely doing it. North Korea has joined in on it. Saudi Arabia has joined in on it. As I said, Venezuela has done it. In fact, a number of South American countries have done it. And South America has actually talked about creating its own allied currency system akin to the euro-dollar. So, yeah, the blood is definitely in the water. Okay, China comes out and blames US for war in Ukraine, saying they triggered the crisis and are now fueling it, which I actually don't disagree with, but it's kind of beside the point. This is what is this? Why is China coming out and saying this? These inflammatory comments. This is obviously trying to degrade more into that US power. It benefits China the more US power is degraded in the short term. I think in the long term, in the far-flung future, we'll look back at this, and countries will look back and go like, I don't know if it did actually benefit us all in the long term to degrade US power. But I don't know. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Who knows? So yeah, China again, more inflammatory language around the US. They are very much poking it's not a bear, the eagle? Poking the eagle, I guess. The dragon is poking the eagle. That doesn't sound right. But anyway, that's what they're doing. And inflaming the situation in this part of the world as well. All right, let's talk about some other stuff. I think the title for this one was NATO in the Pacific and Atlas Shrugged Europe. What do I mean by Atlas Shrugged Europe? Well, this is, if you've read the book Atlas Shrugged, which I love, it's one of my favorite books. It is a lengthy read, and it is written a few years ago now. So the language, I guess, in it, the attention span that's required to take in that information is a little different from what most people are used to today. So it can be a hard read, and it is quite a large book. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of Atlas Shrugged. The left, or the liberal, or the moochers, as they're called in the book, essentially the communists, the people who believe that everyone should get everything equally, despite what effort you put in, they win. And so the people who put in the most effort, the captains of industry, the people who own businesses, the extremely intelligent people, the inventors, the drivers, as it were, of society, look at this and go, well, why would I continue to put in all this effort if I'm not rewarded for this effort, and this person who does nothing is rewarded the same amount for me? And they disappear. And it's kind of like Atlas holding the stone shrugs and just goes, you know what? I'm not holding this anymore. You guys can sort it out. If you want the equal world, take it. I'm leaving. I'm out. And they exit society. They just disappear. So that's essentially what Atlas Shrugged is all about. The consequence of that is the breakdown of society. So you see society utterly fall apart over a time period where things start to break down and things can't be fixed, and they can't maintain stuff, and they see it's not economically viable to maintain other things. And then all of a sudden the regression starts and society starts regressing back and then collapsing. That's what I believe we're looking at right now. This is the point of the story that we're at. We have got to a point where we are essentially, we built a system that is not reinforcing necessarily those drivers in society. And so those drivers are disappearing or crumbling. They don't have the ability to do what they need to do. We have got a society now where these industries aren't being reinforced and supported enough. So they're going to atrophy. This one coming out of Reuters, German energy update. Frankfurt, German industry is, Frankfurt is a place in Germany, by the way, not just a type of sausage, for those who didn't know. I've visited there. It's nice. It's a pretty nice city. I'm spent most of the time outside of the city in Bavaria, but nice part of the world. Anyway, Frankfurt. German industry is set to pay about 40% more for energy in 2023 than in 2021. And that's obviously where the energy crisis was triggered, thanks to Putin. Putin's fault, remember that? Wasn't anyone else's fault. All Putin. Wasn't, the Nord Stream pipeline getting blown up? Because that was probably Putin, because he would shoot himself in the foot like that, because he doesn't like money. No. So anyway, the invasion of Ukraine triggered this energy crisis. So 40% increase. Why is it jumping now? So this was a study that was done by Allianz Trade, which I believe is a subsection of Allianz Insurance conglomerate. And as I've a lot on the line, a lot of money do-re-mi on the line there, because they do these studies and they do it sometimes, well, most of the time I find at least, in a relatively no bullshit kind of way, because they can't bullshit it. They look at the real factors and they go, well, this just is. So what happened in 2021, or the way these contracts work is you write a contract and it's not just like, hey, I'm going to buy gas off you for the next month or the next 3 days, and it's going to cost this. And then 3 days later, it increases and it increases and it increases, 3 days after that, 3 days after that, 3 days after that. The only chumps that get signed up to anything like that is you and me, is end consumers. We're the ones who have to foot that kind of shitty bill. All right. We're the ones who are subject to constant moves in markets. i.e., if you can't go to your local supermarket and go, oh, I like the price of beans right now, I'm going to lock it in right there. So you and me, we're going to sign a contract that beans are always going to be $1 a can. For how long do you want to do this contract? 10 years? Cool. And I promise I will buy X amount of beans. In fact, I'll pay up front right now. Bang, done. So we can't do that. Can't do that at all. I go and buy a can for $1 this week. Next week I go back. That same can could be $5. Could be $10. Who knows? Might be in some sort of hyperinflation event. We get stuck with this sort of stuff. Energy bills will go up and down on a whim. Fuel prices will go up and down on a whim. But large corporations and nations sign contracts that last a number of years. And that's what German industry has done. It's signed contracts that have lasted 2 years or a year and a half. Well, they're coming up for renewal. And guess what? Prices are going up. So there's going to be this jump all of a sudden where we've been seeing, like I've been watching this at least, German industry struggling already and already saying that fuel prices and electricity prices are too much, energy prices too much. Well, it's about to go up here and they are going to go down there. As in, they're just not going to manufacture this stuff. So the report citing contract expiries and delayed wholesale pricing effects, quote, the larger energy price shock still lies ahead for European corporates, said Allianz Trade, the credit insurer that changed its name from Euler Hermes last year. Interesting. So this is essentially what they're looking down the barrel at right now, this 40% jump in prices, and you can guarantee that this is going to mean the shutdown or the immediate ceasing of many manufacturing sectors within Germany. But I mean, this isn't just Germany, right? This is a lot of Europe that's actually going to fall under this. All right, what else have we got? UK government has proposed a $600 million or pound package to help its steel companies go green. But is it enough to save the floundering steel industry? Asks Forbes magazine. Spoiler alert, no, it's not. So here's some key points that they put up from this article here. Runaway energy prices in the UK have made the cost of industry prohibitive over the past couple of years. This is of particular note for steel mills, which sometimes use carbon-intensive blast furnaces. Sometimes, I'm pretty sure they all do, or the larger ones all do. These companies have a factor in the cost, or have to factor in the cost of carbon pricing on top of increased energy costs. So this is, you can kind of file this one under more green idea madness, like the idea that, hey, if we just put a carbon tax on everything, we'll all be fine. We're going to save the world that way. Yeah, okay. You're also going to destroy the world that way. So we can save maybe some of it, and we can definitely destroy some of it as well, as in our major industry. And this is one of the things that people don't quite factor in a lot of the time. That with this sort of shift, there's multiple factors. This ripples throughout a society because people lose jobs. There's more unemployment. There's less income. There's less actual goods being manufactured. There's less ability for it to ramp back up, if it can be. And so the net effect is a downgrading of the socioeconomic standing of a society. That's what we're heading towards. And this is what I'm talking about with this Atlas Shrugged. This one in particular triggered Atlas Shrugged because one of the key characters in that novel runs a steel mill in the US. So, which, has to struggle against increasing tariffs and problems and issues that are imposed from a government that is hell-bent on creating equality, as it were. So that's the situation that we're staring at the moment. This is, for me at least, akin to what Sri Lanka was for a societal collapse. I was looking at that and saying, that's the canary in the coal mine. This is something we can look at. This is something we can learn from and try and avoid that problem as best as we can. Or at least for us as individual preppers, we can look at that and go, all right, let's have a look at Sri Lanka as a case study and then go, how, if that happened in my country, what would I do to actually just support myself and look after myself and my family and my community? We can do this as well. I'm looking at Europe and I'm saying, okay, Europe is in a bad way. What can we do now? And how can we start to build in these systems if this does happen in our country? Because as I was talking about, more and more of these industries are being turned off within our countries. I've talked about it in New Zealand and Australia ad nauseum, just to name a few: concrete manufacturing, fertilizer manufacturing, oil refinery. Okay, there's three right there, three big ones that drive our world at the moment. Well, they're almost gone within Australia and New Zealand. They're almost gone. In fact, I think within New Zealand, they are actually gone. I don't think you've got any oil refining ability. And I think fertilizer might have been shut down as well. So this is what we're looking at. This is the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. Good morning to you, Take the Ride, although I'm keenly aware it's not the morning for you. I'm happy you're here and that you caught me. And good morning to you also, Trad Truther on the Instagram. I like your Floki Viking axe. That's this one up here. This is one of my many axes. I own many axes. I don't know how many axes I own. I should count them up. Maybe over 10, maybe 15 axes. This is one of my favorite ones here. This one is actually a replica Viking axe, and which is actually really, I've used it for chopping wood, and it's actually quite good. But it is made in a place called Gransforsbruk in Sweden, which I visited last year to do some axe forging and to learn some traditional timber frame building. And thank you for creating this segue, Trad Truth, because I think these sort of things are what we should be investing in right now. I'm not pointing all this stuff out to be doom and gloom. I'm not trying to freak you out or anything. Like I always say, I want this information to empower you, to drive you to do more with your life, to get yourself better prepared so that you don't have to necessarily worry about this sort of shit. And one of the ways we can do that is investing our money, which at the moment is decreasing in value because of what our politicians have been doing and will continue to decrease in value through inflation. We can invest that money and convert it from dollars, like electronic bits in a banking system, to solid knowledge and skills within our heads and within our hands. So that's one of the things that I really recommend people go out and invest in, is not necessarily making axes, but building a house is a good thing to invest in, or learning how to do some sort of carpentry or frame building. I think it was a good thing. I recommend it. Peter Rouse says, Jacinta closed it all down. New Zealand has enough oil, it could be oil independent. I assume you think you're talking about in the actual ground to oil to pump there. That's from Peter Rouse, who's a New Zealander. Take the Ride says, continue via watch the report by Suspicious Observer on the Earth's core rotation, sunspots, and the magnetic fields. So what Take the Ride is talking about there is a YouTube channel called Suspicious Observer. It's one that I've only recently come onto, and I think maybe, Peter, you might have put me onto this because I kept talking about earthquakes, and people kept writing in earthquakes, it's to do with solar events. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Then I went and looked up Suspicious Observer, or somebody sent me a link to one of their videos, and I was blown away. I highly recommend it. This person actually does a fantastic job. I cannot recommend their YouTube video enough, or their YouTube channel enough. They've also got a Telegram page called Space Weather Watch, or Space Weather something. Think about that one. Space weather. Just put in space weather. It should come up. And they just look at what the sun is doing every day, do a little 2-minute, 5-minute report on it, saying, hey, this sunspot's coming out. There's this coronal mass ejection. There's M-class ejections. There's X-class ejections, blah, blah, blah. But it's a really good little wrap-up. And then they've got a series of videos that you can go really into depth on how solar ejections affect the Earth, affect the Earth's magnetic field, and the interaction it has with the Earth's core, and what's actually happening at the moment with the poles, the magnetic poles moving, which sounds real tinfoil hat. I get it. This sounds crazy as all, like, as a mad woman shit, but it is not. Okay. This was something I was actually taught when I was in the military. When we're doing land navigation, you get a map, and one of the first things you need to do is check the magnetic variance on it, because every year the magnetic north moves, and it's moving at a constant rate, or was moving at a constant rate when they back, talking 15 years ago now. And so you have to do the calculation. You look at the map. Okay, this map is printed in the year 2000. Magnetic variation is 0.2 of a degree every year. So it's been 10 years. Okay, we're at 2 degrees. So then when you actually do your bearings, you had to add 2 degrees to the bearing that you had via the map, because it's now changed. So that what you don't need to know that for anything else. But what that pointed out to me is when I started watching these videos, I was like, oh yeah, the poles do move. That's a fact. We've known that for a long time. Their movement has increased in the past 5 years. So they are moving more. We know that the poles have moved historically, and not just moved like, whoa, moved massively. And we know that there was catastrophic events that have happened in the world, on Earth, in the past, in the far past, 6,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, 18,000 years ago, 24,000 years ago, so on and so forth. Now, what we're starting to see is the alliance between these two. We're starting to see, oh, hang on, maybe there's a pole shift around this area here where there was this cataclysmic event where we said, oh, all the dinosaurs got wiped out X million years ago. It was because of a meteor. Or was it something else? So anyway, check that out. I think it's very, very fascinating. You can watch it yourself. You can make a decision. You can make an informed decision. You can do your own research. One of the things I like about Suspicious Observer's channel is that he doesn't just do the research. He shows you the articles. Here is this latest peer-reviewed journal article that says this, blah, 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 blah. Here's where he has the whole thing, puts it up there. You can see the title. You can see the authors. Here's this one that says this. Here's this one that says this. So that's what I like about him. He puts up that sort of stuff. Take the Ride says, have any of you watched the reports by Suspicious Observer here on YouTube? That's what I'm talking about. Definitely check them out. Peter Rouse says, currently moving at a higher rate, talking about the pole shift. It is. It has to do with location when the poles shift. This happens every 12,000 years, and it's recorded in history in our rocks. So you can actually see it in the rocks. The rocks get magnetized, essentially. And so there are certain rocks that you can find that are pointing somewhere else. And you're like, oh, that's weird. This says north that way. But that means the North Pole would have to be over there. Anyway, enough about that. What else have I got in here? Last thing that I'm going to talk about, because this is kind of touching on what I was going to say, with that green policy about increasing a carbon tax on steel mills is going to destroy the steel industry within the UK. Well, here's more attacks through carbon taxes now on something that I'm very worried about: food. So Canada has come out, and some documents that I don't know if they got leaked or they just sort of got released and somebody picked them up and actually read through them for once and was like, what? Documents reveal feds considering carbon tax-like rule for farm fertilizers. This is within Canada. The federal Liberal government has considered forcing a carbon tax-like regulatory backstop onto farmers should voluntary agreements to reduce fertilizer emissions not meet Ottawa's arbitrary standards. And it could see crop production across the country drastically decline. I think you could replace could with definitely there. And the word voluntary with enforced by pain of death. Because that's essentially what's happened. Hey, we want you to volunteer to pay extra for growing food for everyone. I know you're struggling. I know you're finding it hard. I know banks don't give a fuck if your crop survives or not year on year. I know you're getting pressures from artificial GMO companies to plant their shit and spray it with chemicals. I know all this is happening. Hey, I know the suicide rate within farmers is statistically far higher than it is in the general population. But I want you to voluntarily pay more now because you're evil and bad and you're fucking the earth. How dare you? But keep growing that food. All right, keep growing that food until we can figure out the pink sludge formula in our labs. You keep growing that food, but pay more. All right, because you're not close enough to bankruptcy right now. We need you to pay more. Oh, you don't want to? Cool. We'll just force it then. I'm just going to make you do it. And then they go, well, this could affect the amount of food we have in the supply. No shit, Sherlock. 100%. If I was a farmer and they came to me and they were like, hey, we want you to voluntarily pay more, I'd be, go fuck yourself, mate. No, not happening. And then they said, we're going to make you do it. And I'll go, okay, I'm not growing food anymore. For you. I'm going to grow it for me, grow it for my family, grow it for my mates, grow it for my community. And I'm going to sell it to them, and we're going to use a barter system and or gold or silver and or, I don't know, maybe Bitcoin or something. I'm not even going to use your dollars. So you can just fuck right off. See you later. I wonder at what point that the people in the cities who are making these decisions start to go hungry, where they go, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Oh, maybe that was the wrong idea. I don't think there would be that point, actually. I actually predict it would be something more like this. people in the cities who do not grow their own food, but yet make all the decisions on our food, actually start to get affected by what they've done to the food system, I think at that point, they actually get angry at those who are growing food. I think they will force farmers to do their bidding at that point. And why do I think that? Because we have clear historical examples of that. If you don't believe me, go and look at what happened in China, and especially look at what happened in Russia, those communist countries. And you know, you hear me badmouth communism. I don't know, like, working together, I think, is a good idea. Striving that people have equal opportunity to do things, I think, is a good idea. But you often hear me rag on communism. This is probably my main beef with it. They essentially, in Russia, turned farmers into enemies of the state. And once they turn them into that, they then turn them into slaves. So that's why I think that could happen. That's why I think that's an eventuality that we could be approaching, which is not something I want to move towards. So this is why we have to grow our own food. This is why we have to encourage others to do so by, like I said, bartering or paying for food grown by your friends, by local farmers, by people in your area. Whatever it is, it can be any sort of exchange. Hey, you might look after someone's kids, and in exchange, they give you some zucchinis from their garden. Whatever it looks like for you guys, start doing it now, because it's these little things. We are creating our own system, and we, like I'm talking about with Russia creating their own system with Iran, and China creating their own system with Saudi Arabia. This is what we need to start doing. We really need to start moving towards this, and now's the time to do it. Not when it's too late, not when it's already done and dusted. Just catching up on some comments here on the YouTube. This Take the Ride said this, talking about the polls again, this all has to do with our 12,000 year cycle, which is proven in our rock. That's why they say North Pole used to be filled with palm trees. 12,000 year cycle is even mentioned in the Torah. I'm a massive fan of mythology. I'm a massive fan of history. I'm a massive fan of mythology. I like to actually look at the two as intertwined. So we can't look at mythology, I don't at least look at mythology as factual, as in solid 100% fact. But I think there's truth in there, in all mythology. And one thing that I find very interesting is the flood. Almost all mythologies have some form of cataclysmic event that happened, flood-like event usually, that happened. So if you start to look into that, you can see that appearing, and we can actually start to look at that and go, maybe this did happen. Maybe this actually happened in the history of the world, and this is our remembrance. If you write something down, it won't be there in 3,000 years. Like, do we have a book that was written? No, we don't have a book that was written 3,000 years ago, because we didn't really have paper 3,000 years ago. Even things chiseled into stone, we have so few things from 3,000 years ago, and even fewer from 6,000 years ago, and almost nothing from 10,000 plus years ago. How do you get a story? How do you get a piece of information to last 10,000 years? You weave it into a tale, and you make it a part of the people's culture. That's how you get a story to continue on. And I believe that's what these are. They're actual stories that have continued down the timeline through generations as a warning. It was like, you could look at these flood stories and go, this was the prepper SitRep. It's 12,000 years ago. This was a dude sitting there, not staring at a camera, but like chiseling into stone or something, or just telling the story, going from village to village, telling the story of what happened to his great grandpappy. Anyway, Peter Rouse says this is pending during a solar pole reversal. Take the Ride says the largest egg supplier in the United States is making feed for people with backyard chickens, and they bought out the other largest egg company. They make your chicken to not lay eggs. I've been talking about this non-laying egg chicken stuff for a week or two now. Something concerns me. And again, feed, there's something you've got to look at. Who controls your feed? They say they don't put through the feed is coming through on the bag. They don't put what's in the feed on the bag, and they're selling it through places like Tractor Supply. I don't know if we have an equivalent of Tractor Supply here in Australia. It's kind of big rural store. I've got a big rural store here, but it's our local rural store. There's not one that goes all over Australia that I know of, at least. The largest, that's the same sort of stuff. In cahoots with Purina. Purina's a animal food company. Again, big money in these sorts of things. So these sort of things we've got to think about. I was reading a story recently about the amount of plastics that are going into feeds. This was particular to pig feed, that they're actually grinding up rubbish and mixing it with a little bit of actual food and turning that into pig feed for people to feed their pigs. So microplastics galore. Not microplastics, actually. It was actually macroplastics. It was big chunks of plastic that were going in to pig feed, which obviously then goes into them, which then, if we eat, goes into us. So pretty disturbing stuff here. Just as a reminder, right? We survived as human beings for hundreds of thousands of years with no government help, with no big companies creating products for us. We have survived, for what we know of, for probably like 10 to 15,000 years or thereabouts, farming animals with no government help, really. There's government oversight, a form of governance oversight in that, in most places, but certainly no mass manufactured food. Just remember that. You can do it. We can do it. How did pigs and chickens eat before we had big farm? Funnily enough, pigs eat everything, including plastic, apparently. Chickens almost eat everything too. So scraps. We can supply our own food for our own livestock. We can do that. All right, that's it for today, gang. It's almost been going an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, I really appreciate it. And as always, if you've got any other questions, please feel free to shoot them through to me. If you come across some stories and you're like, hey, this is interesting to me, I think, Gads, you'll find this interesting too, please send it through to me. I'll have a flick through it and try and have a chat about it. But yeah, apart from that, keep gardening. Keep working on your homogeneous food supply, on your food circle being as close to your home as possible, and get out of the pocket of the government. Let go of the pocket. A prison reference for y'all to finish off on. Hope you're all doing well out there, staying safe, staying healthy, eating well, exercising, moving your body, getting plenty of sunlight, smiling, laughing at the clown world that we live in at the moment. Because that's what I do most of the time, is I read these stories and I lol. I laugh out loud. This is funny and depressing, but funny. And yeah, taking care of each other. So until next time, gang, stay safe and Semper Paratus.